How do you pilot that? How do you pilot that? How do you drive?
If you tilt this way, you do this. If you go up and down, it does that.
Okay. So you turn that light just by...
And I got my feet on the rudder as well, which...
okay.
And this is the accelerator here. And that's all. This is a handbrake when you're on the ground.
No.
Very simple. And these clips here, you put your map on here, so you can see, and you put your sandwiches inside here. On mine, the seat is a little further back so that I can get my legs down. And then this is the compass. It tells you, you set it to whichever direction you want to go and lock it. And then you just keep the aeroplane pointing so that the arrow is in the right direction here. And that's it. This tells you how fast you're going. And this tells you how fast the engine is going. That tells you how high you are. And these two tell you the temperature of the oil in the engine and the pressure to make sure that the engine is working properly. And when you land, you just you slow down by just closing the throttle so the engine isn't pulling you along anymore, and you gently descend, and when you get near the ground you tip the nose up like that and it just sinks into the ground. If you're lucky, otherwise if you go wrong it goes for a big bounce. Isn't very good on hard runways, and it was designed for grass. And if you look out at the back, you'll see that it hasn't got a wheel at the back. All it has is a lump of metal, a skid. And so as soon as that skid hits the ground, it starts slowing you down. You can use the brakes, but it's much easier just not to. So really, this aeroplane would really only operate off grass. And my airfield at home is just grass, and so I'm quite happy with that. No, I bought my Puss Moth in 1980, and I've done about 2,000 hours in it in all, which is quite a lot really. I don't fly all that often, but I journeys around. Well, I often come to Europe and so on. I just like. Oh, thanks, Henry. I just old machines are generally quite simple, and I'm quite simple really. So it was. When I was a child, I used to make model airplanes, and then the models got bigger, and then eventually the models got big enough for me to get inside.
Basta, non viene di questo, invece la ruota.
Cioè, mi metto sotto.
Okay. Back here. Down at the front.
Ragazzi, sotto sta toccando.
But most of de Havilland's aircraft from this time in the 30s until 38, 39, they all had folding wings because it's very easy to do, and it was just a practical thing. It was done that way because Mr. de Havilland, who made the aeroplane, used to rent out hangars to keep them in, and of course he could get more hangars in if the aeroplanes were small, so he got more money for for his rent. It started actually with a regulation in England in the 1920s. They had competitions for light aircraft, and one of the regulations there was that you should be able to fold the wings to get it through the gate in a field, because engines weren't very reliable, and if the engine stopped and you went down and landed in a field, you had to be able to tow it home behind your car. They used linen. Linen was used almost exclusively on aeroplanes from the First World War till even now, although they use plastic fabrics now, because it's so strong. The linen on these wings, for instance, you can see here that it's that there's a join here that is just sewn together. In fact, funnily enough, that seam is called a balloon seam because it's done. You fold the fabric and then sew it twice, and that's what they used to use in the 1880s for sewing up balloons as well, because it's airtight. But then, so when I'm covering this wing, let's say, I have to sew it together and then it's then sewn together on the back edge, and you have to do lots of little stitches to sew it together, and then it gets it's covered in what's called dope, which is a kind of cellulose paint, and that shrinks the linen so it's all tight, and then you build up the layers so that it completely fills the linen. As you can see, you can hardly see the grain of the linen now, and then then you sew it to the ribs. These ribs here, it's sewn through the top and through the bottom and round so that it won't come apart. So it's quite a complicated business. The colours are exactly the same as they were when it was new, and all the fabric on this aeroplane has been taken off. In fact, the whole aeroplane, every part has been taken to pieces and cleaned and repainted again. But there were parts where you could see exactly what the original colour was, and so that's the colour it's got here. And I've tried to do everything exactly as it was when it was new. And there are one or two things on it, I won't go into the detail, but little tiny things which were done on this aeroplane, which were done slightly differently on modern aeroplanes. And so I did it the old-fashioned way on here, because really, in 100 years' time, when everybody here is dead, this aeroplane will still exist. And so, from a historical point of view, it seemed to me important to do that.